is a one-of-a-kind experience. What starts as a child's game played after school or on the weekends becomes a multi-billion-dollar spectacle where millions of people from all over the world gather to see the best of the best that planet Earth has to offer. It's the only place where you can see people defying what we thought was humanly possible on a nightly basis. And the best part is, it's all live, in real time, and totally unscripted. Or is it?
Coach, a terrific start that led to a 14-point lead at one point, but it's down to 5. What changed those last few minutes for you guys?
You want me to be honest with you?
Yes.
The guys with the whistles.
Officiating went down the stretch there, but you guys pulled it out and was a big win.
Every starting to wonder why the league is losing money. That's why. People pay good money to come watch you. Have free play, they try to take over the fucking game.
Shaq, we're on live. I know.
The league knew that they had an agenda in which we weren't part of the agenda. The agenda was Miami. He wasn't going to Miami to be like Cleveland.
Throughout the years, we've seen some suspicious NBA moments. Weirdly lucky NBA lottery picks, blockbuster trade tampering, and even a full investigation by the federal government which revealed shocking connections between the NBA, its referees, and the New York Mafia.
You told the FBI, this is a quote, "You don't realize how easy this was for me knowing what I know." What exactly did you know?
It may sound like crazy conspiracy talk, but once you look into it a little bit, you might start thinking differently. Is the NBA actually rigged? Let me start by saying that I understand just how difficult the job of being an NBA ref must be. The game is played so fast, and there are so many calls that come down to millimeters and milliseconds that it's virtually impossible to get them all right. But it's not really the handful of bad calls that you see in NBA games that make it suspicious. It's when the game is officiated totally unevenly. Just take a look at what disgraced NBA ref Tim Donaghy had to say about the league. If there's anyone who knows about rigging basketball games, it's this dude. He was fired and imprisoned in 2007 after betting on games he officiated. The NBA investigation found that Tim's picks were winning at an 88% success rate. Donaghy has claimed on multiple occasions that refs have purposely rigged NBA games to prolong playoff series, protect the most lucrative franchises, and promote players who have the most superstar power and make the best NBA storylines. Let's unpack why the NBA would do this. Money. Okay, now that that's done, let's peek into some of the estimated profits the NBA stands to make by doing this. Here's some of the numbers from the 2016 finals between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors. This series was one of the most viewed playoff series of all time, and is riddled with suspicious NBA officiating. According to NBA records, normal playoff games bring in about $2 million just in ticket sales. So, a series that goes 7 games versus 4 games has the potential of an extra $6 million. That's pretty good incentive to prolong a series. But for bigger rivalries like LeBron versus Steph Curry, the numbers get even more ridiculous. According to SeatGeek, the average ticket cost for Game 6 of the 2016 NBA Finals was $605. For Game 7, the average ticket cost was $1,136. Both games were sell-out events with nearly 20,000 fans in attendance. By the series extending to 7 games, an extra $34 million was generated in ticket sales alone. $12 million in Game 6 and $22 million in Game 7. Remember, this series could have ended in Game 5. This was all potential money the NBA cashed in on. But the Warriors didn't really have a chance in Game 5 because they didn't have Draymond Green, which we'll get to later. But ticket sales are chump change in the grand scheme of things. The real money comes from ad revenue and viewership, where do-or-die games like Game 6 and 7 bring in boatloads of money. Ad revenue data from iSpot TV estimated that Game 6 and Game 7 of the 2016 NBA Finals brought in around $40 million per game. So by the series being extended, the NBA generated an extra $80 million. The NBA is a business first and foremost. It's hard to picture any successful business leaving that kind of potential money on the table if they can help it at all. So how might the NBA ensure that they produce the outcomes that they want? Well, there's a few ways that refs can manipulate an NBA game. And you can guess most of them. Fouls, travels, carries, no calls, lane violations, no lane violations. But sometimes it's less subtle, like straight-up player suspensions.
No punches were thrown, no fisticuffs took place or anything like that. As far as I'm concerned, there should have been 2 technicals issued to both of them, and that should have been that. The fact that this is the NBA Finals, for a call like this to be made, I think is as egregious as it gets. I think it's a disgusting decision on the part of the NBA, and I'm incredibly disappointed by it.
With 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter of Game 4 of the 2016 NBA Finals, Draymond and LeBron got tangled up and Green appeared to take a shot at LeBron's nuts. Both LeBron and Draymond were given technical fouls at the time, which was fair. But after the game, the league reviewed the play and upgraded Draymond's technical foul to a flagrant 1. This immediately triggered a 1-game suspension because Draymond reached the threshold for the league's flagrant foul point system. As you know, Draymond was and still is an integral part of both the Warriors' offense and defense. Even though the Warriors were firmly up 3-1, the league virtually doomed the Warriors to lose in Game 5. But you can't blame the NBA for Draymond straight up kicking dudes in the balls, right? Well, turns out he did the exact same thing to Steven Adams in the previous series twice, and he only got 1 flagrant 1 out of it. The difference? The series was tied at that point, and OKC wound up winning the game where Draymond kicked Adams. The Warriors probably would have lost if Draymond was suspended for 1 game in that series, which he could have been because he was 1 flagrant foul away from suspension. Now, maybe the NBA was being forced to step in on Draymond's antics in the finals. Or it could be that the league didn't want a short Western Conference playoff series, where a small market team like OKC upset a massively popular Golden State team. Remember, Steph Curry and the Warriors led the league in merchandise sales, viewership, and TV ratings both that year and the year before. This was the NBA's golden goose. So, if you want to put your tinfoil hat on now, the NBA successfully prolonged the 2016 Final Series at least another 2 games by suspending Draymond Green. According to Tim Donaghy, that's what really happened. Donaghy told Yahoo that, quote, the league forged the Draymond Green suspension to prolong the series, which has been a ratings bonanza. Now, a player suspension in the NBA Finals is a pretty egregious decision. A more subtle way that refs may attempt to influence a series is through early foul calls on crucial players. Fouls are like the life force of an NBA player. When they are against you, they can destroy shooting rhythm, team game plans, and momentum. When they're in your favor, they can invigorate a slumping team and keep the game competitive. For instance, after the win in Game 5 of the 2016 Finals, the Cavs were still on the brink of elimination. And now the Warriors had Draymond Green back. Momentum was definitely on their side. So to start Game 6, Steph Curry suspiciously gets 2 early foul calls against him. Coach Steve Kerr is forced to bench his best player. Curry plays just 6 minutes in the first quarter, the fewest first quarter minutes he played the entire series. While Steph is on the bench, the Cavs capitalize on their opportunity.
Finding the perfect developer isn't easy, but at Upwork, we found her. She's in Prague, between the perfect cup of coffee and her museum of personal computers. And you can find her and millions of other talented pros right now on Upwork.com.
We are farmers.
They outscore the Warriors by 20 points, the largest first quarter deficit the entire series. But in the second quarter, Steph plays all 12 minutes. The Warriors outscore the Cavs by 4, but still face a huge halftime deficit. Just by making Steph unavailable early in the game, the refs drastically sway the momentum of the game. This is the Cavs' game to lose, and a Game 7 looks inevitable. Now, the Warriors can still win, but it would have to be a miraculous comeback, which they still almost pulled off, until Curry picked up his 5th and 6th personal foul and was ejected from the game. Some of these fouls were pretty ticky-tacky, especially for playoff basketball, and Coach Steve Kerr seemed to agree.
He's the MVP of the league. He gets 6 fouls called on him. 3 of them were absolutely ridiculous. He steals the ball from Kyrie clean at one point. LeBron flops on the last one. Jason Phillips falls for that for a flop. And this is the MVP of the league. We're talking about these touch fouls in the NBA Finals.
Which leads me to my next point, the idea of superstar treatment. Superstar treatment is nothing new to the average NBA fan. Whether it's an uncalled double dribble or travel or a blatant foul with no whistle, refs sometimes just seem to treat star players like they're John Cena. But why does that happen? Well, it could be that refs are fanboying or expecting greatness even when it doesn't happen. But it may also be that the league instructs officials to call the game differently for the players who make them the most money. A classic example of this was Dwayne Wade's performance in the 2006 Finals. Wade shot 97 free throws in 6 games, an NBA Finals record. He had 24 in the first 2 games, both losses. Then, with the series on the line, he proceeded to shoot 73 in the next 4, including 25 free throws in Game 5 and 21 in Game 6. The Mavericks as a team attempted 25 foul shots in Game 5 and just 23 in Game 6. Wade averaged 18 free throws in the last 4 games, prompting a retired FBI agent to tell Mavs owner Mark Cuban to sue the NBA for fixing the series because he believed Cuban would win the case. The final way that NBA officials can influence the outcome is by shifting the game's rhythm with the way they choose to call it. If you watch enough basketball, you can start to get a feel for how the refs are going to call a game fairly early on. It should make sense that players get a hang of how things are going to be called too, and they can adjust their games accordingly. So when the refs suddenly start changing things up in the middle of a playoff series, it can cause some real problems. Like they did in Game 6 of the 2002 Western Conference Finals. The birth of NBA rig conspiracies. Tim Donaghy said point blank in a court case that NBA refs who were, quote, company men manipulated this game to extend the series. Later coming out and saying it was former ref Dick Bavetta, who was, quote, the NBA's go-to guy put on Game 6s to force Game 7s. Now back in 2002, Chris Webber's Kings were the best team in the NBA with a 61-21 regular season record. They destroyed the Jazz and Mavericks in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. Unfortunately, they ran into one of the greatest duos in the history of basketball, Shaq and Kobe. Surprisingly, the Kings outplayed the Lakers and took a 3-2 series lead. Game 6 was an elimination game for the Lakers and was incredibly tight, up until the second half when the refs seemed to just lose their minds and start blowing calls left and right. They seemed to be calling everything for and nothing against the Lakers, prompting longtime Kings play-by-play announcer to call it the worst officiated game in NBA history. Even former presidential candidate Ralph Nader called for a formal investigation. In the second half alone, the Kings received 23 foul calls against them. Meanwhile, the Lakers received just 12. Every time the Kings were close to pulling away, their momentum was shut down. And when the Lakers struggled, they were bailed out with preferential calls. Both Vlade Divac and Scott Pollard fouled out of the game. If the Lakers three-peat was what the NBA was going for, they got what they wanted. LA ended up winning Game 6 and Game 7. They went on to win the championship, and the Kings never really recovered. It's truly difficult to say whether or not the NBA rigs their games. On one hand, there's really only so much NBA refs could potentially do without being so blatant that they end up in federal prison like Tim Donaghy, who, by the way, might be an expert on fixing games, but he's also proven to be dishonest and willing to commit crimes for money in the past. So he may not be the most trustworthy source of info. On the other hand, there are some really suspicious moments you can point to that lead you to believe that they're trying to promote superstars, force long playoff game series, and get the most lucrative matchups that they can. What do you guys think? Have I convinced you that the NBA is rigged? Or does this all simply come down to the refs being human? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed these